Hi, I'm Keith, obviously, and real brief plug, IMM is probably the biggest agency in Colorado you've never heard of. We're about 100 people up in Boulder. A lot of national consumer brands. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. My role, just really briefly there, is really pretty broad technology, but initially I have been tasked with inventory quality, viewability, cross-device, attribution, stuff, and then I also touch on all kinds of other fun things. Most recently I was at Spot Exchange, so that brings my connection here. Go ahead, next slide. And today I want to talk to you about inventory quality. So when I first started looking at this, I've known about this issue for quite some time. I've actually been in the business for about 20 years. Inventory quality first hit my radar probably maybe 7 years ago. And I started seeing some of the same stuff we see today. The perspective here is not just viewability, but I'm also looking at fraudulent traffic, and I'm also looking at brand safety. And what I hope to get across to you is an explanation of what each of those are and how they all work together, because they're all really interrelated and you can't really look at them independently. So this is just the sort of slide that says, hey, let me have your attention, please, because half of your campaign might be wasted. We all know that little saying, half of your campaign is wasted, you just don't know which half. Well, we have a pretty good indication. We know what half online might actually be wasted. So if you mash up everybody's data, you can see that 30% of your traffic could be eaten up by a bot, and 20% could be simply unviewable. So hence the blind rollout. Where am I pointing? Up here? So the first, there it is, delay. Quality can be quantified. So the way I look at inventory quality, it has two dimensions. It has is it a real impression? Yes or no? If it is real, how real is it? So then you have the subjective value and score to look at. So that's kind of how I evaluate this. So the first cut is it a real impression? Pause. Okay. So this is really around fraud. So is it a real impression? Anywhere from 11 to 40% of your impressions might not be real. They might be from computers or bots. Basically, it's a computer that has been hijacked and has some software on it that's doing its own little thing in the background. There are good bots, there are bad bots, of course, we all know about. The good ones being Googlebot is probably the most notable one, but the bad bots are the ones we're concerned about. There's also an issue of ad laundering, ad stacking, goes by a couple different terms, but I'll show you a couple examples of those in just a second. Hopefully this video pops through. I think this is an awesome video. It explains bad bot behavior and what to look for. And we don't have any audio, do we? It's okay. Let me see if I can explain it here. So this is a time lapse, of course, and on the right you'll see something like some sort of a tool that shows you the kind of activity your computer might be pinging on the internet back and forth, what loads. Of course, this is sped up. But the left side is, this is an actual video of what is happening in the background on this particular computer that was infected with some bot software. So as you can see, this particular computer is loading a lot of content, a lot of web pages, a lot of video, and presumably it happens in the background without the actual user's knowledge or consent. So I can see this happening to my dad. He could easily download something on his computer, not know what it is, and click OK, and next thing you know, this is running in the background. So over a 7-minute period, this one computer is generating thousands and thousands of ads. Now consider that a botnet, which is a network of computers, could be in the millions. We're talking about billions and billions of impressions as they accumulate. So I'm not going to wait for that red bar to go all the way to the top. I think you get the idea. But it's a really good illustration of how it works and what it does. Oh, starting over. So the next question, once you determine that you're actually talking to a real person, how real is your impression? So the notion of, we all rely heavily on whitelists and blacklists for determining where we want to show our ad. The problem with that is about 40% of the domains coming through are not real. So they could be masked, they could be unknown, they could be intentionally masked, or it just could be accidental. So here's an example of some actual domains that we saw that came through incorrectly. Here's a obvious example of right safety and how it is being could potentially be used in an environment where news is conflicting with the advertiser, right? Singapore airline crash. Who wants to be involved in that sort of content? And then the final point, by the way, do I get time credit for the delay on the clicker? Okay. So the final point is, can someone see my ad? So this is viewability. So I would say there was a nice flurry of news in December about viewability from all kinds of sources. Probably the most notable one is Google. They said 50% of their display ads are viewable, meaning 50% are not. So this is a rough number. What viewability basically says is it's an opportunity to see an ad. It doesn't really mean it was actually seen or that you could actually view it, but it was actually within what they call the viewable pane of a browser. So whether you scroll up and down, and the fact that it was shown. So 50% of the pixels have to be in your pane, your viewport for at least a second for display and 2 seconds for video. The big underlying assumption here is that it is measurable. If JavaScript is disabled in the browser, by the publisher, by the user, whatever the case may be, it becomes unmeasurable. And actually today, some of the research I was doing this morning with our data, I saw a variance on one campaign anywhere from 27 to 80% of being measurable, meaning that up to 2/3 of the campaign is not even measurable for viewability. So real quick, what does that look like? Can't really see the colors that well, but display out on top, display out on the right, video out on the bottom, and then of course the browser and the scroll bar. So the ad on top is 100% in view. Typically it's considered the above the fold unit. The ad on the right, you can see, is about 10 or 20% in view. Can somebody up there help me?
Can you move that laptop?
There you go.
It's blocking it.
And the bottom, of course, is not viewable. So technically this would be a non-viewable impression. Click, please. And then as you scroll down the page, the top one goes out of view, the bottom one comes in view, go ahead and click again. And then as you keep scrolling down, now the ad on top is not viewable at all. So that's kind of how the viewability metric is measured. Of course, there's a time component as well. The final point I want to make here in the big picture is all of these things are interrelated. So unviewable impressions could be a bot. It doesn't necessarily mean they are, but they certainly could be because a bot can't see. A masked domain may also be fraudulent. We've seen that relationship. Masked domains may also be unviewable, and unviewable impressions simply may be masked. So to look at any one of these independently, you're really missing 2/3 of the picture. Final point, here's a great example. You don't want to be on an adult site. We have stacked ads on the right here, so the ad on the back with the gecko is technically unviewable because it's being covered up by another ad. So Ameritrade gets 100% viewability and Gecko gets 0. And of course, this all can be caused from a bot. So if you do all of these things and address them all, yes, it's going to cost you more money. You might have performance improvements. You may not. What you're definitely going to see is publishers who are going to say, hey, if you're going to hold my feet to the fire, share a report with me so we're seeing the same numbers.